We played some chess. We played the semifinals of the team chess battle against Wesley and Alice. We knew that it's going to be a more difficult match than the one against Anish and Danny. And it was. It was a pretty tricky match. The first game, I think we played a great game. We got the winning advantage, and then our technique failed us. Can I say that? Can I say that
Yeah,
our technique failed us?
also very good defender. So, oh, why do we do this to ourselves?
What if they go rook c3,
E2,
king c4? We have. What do we have?
knight D2, king B5. Yeah, it might not. I'm not sure about that one. Might be winning, it might not.
No. We have king d1. Take, king e2, king c4, king d1.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah, king E2, king E2. Wow, this was very clutch. Very nice.
Yeah.
You won us the game.
Oh my goodness. Whew.
Well, I think it was a really nice game, and then yeah, at some point we just. I mean, I had a feeling. I had this bad feeling, like at some moment, like after rook takes a3, because yeah, we are a piece up, but it's possible to mess this up. Okay, I think that the main mistake was that we made this like practical mistake was we made this move king h4 rather than just going for king g4, where it's impossible to mess up. And we did consider it, and it was like, what do we do? Do we go for it? Do we not? I mean, I sort of thought, okay, we're gonna win either way, right?
Yeah.
So, but this is the way, like this is the way I would do it in a game, in over the board game,
You
because
would take on
no matter
g4
who
and
my
f4.
opponent is, like even if I'm playing a computer, there's no way I don't win this. So while in the other position, if I'm playing a computer, okay, there's some doubt maybe in my mind that like the computer will put up resistance.
Yeah.
Uh, but this one, it's like no matter who you are, no matter who you're playing against, there's nothing to really calculate. You just kind of push your pawns forward. You're up 2 pawns. It's a very simplified position. So then, okay, we played. It's on an objective mistake, king h4.
I will take blame for that because in the end you told me, okay, just choose something. I think we were down to our last minute at this point. We had to make a decision, and my greed basically spoke for itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a mistake. It's just maybe like not the most practical.
By
And
the
then
engine,
like
by the way, king h4 is the better move. But
yeah,
from a
but it's
practical
like
perspective, definitely not.
both moves are definitely game over in the right hands. Just that we like our objective mistake where we messed the win up was probably started with bishop takes g2. That's where it started. Like if we don't give this bishop up, I was kind of hesitant, but like we should have just played a move like bishop e4, for example. Um, and
Yeah.
I think I like suggested this for a second, then I saw some rook h4 check, and I was like, let's not do it. But rook h4 leads nowhere, and like here, basically, there are positions where you're winning, but you have to prove it, and there are positions where you're winning, but your opponent has to try to find some counterplay.
Mm-hmm.
And after bishop e4, it's the latter, where our opponent has to try to find some counterplay, which doesn't exist.
Yeah.
While after bishop g2, king f4, king d6, it's actually the former, where we are the ones who have to kind of find the way because there are a lot of natural moves that are going to be a draw. So it's like our path is limited. Like let's say rook c8, rook a2. I see a computer says knight b7, for example.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And like king d5 and then king e3. So it's like already playing with only moves. And b3, rook c, the win already became very difficult.
Yeah. Rook c5 and rook b5. Yeah, this is not easy. This is not easy stuff.
And then like, I guess it's already after we played rook d3, which I think was my suggestion, but already to win it, we would have had to like dig pretty deep. Maybe not so deep, but knight d4. And then rook goes to d5. Turns out that it's much better.
Put the rook on b5.
But the rook on d3, yeah, it's like probably not winning. I guess we had like some kind of miraculous knight d2, but it was already past the point where a human could probably win this.
Yeah, yeah, and then
Okay, and then they blundered.
they made a significant mistake trying to simplify. And we kind of conceptually we made the same mistake. We tried to simplify the position to something technical, right? A technical position which we know that it's winning by taking on g2, just minimize material, and that's exactly what we tried to do as well with rook c3. Unfortunately, they
Yeah,
just didn't
it is good
calculate.
to know that this position with the king on b5, for example, is a draw. Although it's not maybe like something you'll ever see in your own game,
Right.
but it's very unusual, right? Because it is like a protected pawn, blockaded past pawn, piece up, a knight up. It's a And if we get our king to like b2, I guess that we win, right? I mean, if the king ever gets there,
Is there a way to
safe from
stop
check.
it?
Yeah, we can never
Safe,
get our king.
safe from check. Yeah, that's a very good point. There's
Like we
always
were
going to be
trying,
checks.
then like we can never get there because like let's say like the rook always stays on the second, and if we ever try to bring our king back, we need to use our rook, but then the knight on b3 starts hanging. So there's no way to bring our king back to the queen side to protect the knight where it needs to be.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's an interesting endgame. It's definitely not um like the thing is people who watch on these live streams, they kind of just look at the bar, right? They're not looking at the position at all. So so for them it's like, oh, this is like a simple draw because the bar is
It's
level.
going up and down,
Uh,
or like this one
but
level. Yeah.
I don't think that most people would know that this is a draw unless they played around, like strong players would know that it's a draw unless they played around with it and eventually they found that you can't really make progress. But it's not an obvious draw. I so I've seen this like with the pawn on a6, knight on c5. There was a very famous game, Kramnik Kasparov from the World Championship match in London. I forget which game it was. It was an early one. Maybe like round six or uh so Kramnik actually ended up winning this match,
Mm-hmm.
but he did miss a win in this game. Let me see if I can try to find this game because
Yeah,
it is interesting.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and as you mentioned, people don't actually know that it's a draw. You don't have access to the engine during the game, so this is quite crucial. You don't see the bar going up and down. And I've actually gone through these games and I've listened to the commentary that we were giving, and I realized how bad most people are at assessing live in play the positions, even in the opening phase. Like sometimes we thought that we're clearly better and the position objectively was very close to equal. The same goes for our opponents. They thought that they're better or like sometimes worse, and the position was somewhere around equal. It just goes to show how practicality in the game of chess is so different than the objective, cold, raw assessment of the engine.
Yeah. So in this game, I found like it was pawn on a6, knight on c7,
Uh-huh.
piece up and a pawn up.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was actually like a mutual blunder game, I think, because I think Black had a draw at some point, but then made a mistake, and then Kramnik was winning, but made a mistake, and the game ended in a draw. And like White lost the pawn. So these things are tough. I mean, that was a world championship match between two of the best players of all time, right?
Yeah.
Gary, arguably best player of all time, or second best, and Kramnik certainly among the best players of all time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like what you said, I've also noticed that players misevaluate often, top
All the
players as
time.
well. Uh, but I think our evaluation function was pretty good in this match. Like we had a general idea of where we were standing, like we were slightly better, um, then much better it felt like. Then we won a piece. Okay, it's obvious to everyone that White is winning now. And then we were a bit late to realize that it's a draw here, but I think we started to feel the danger that we were endangering the win.
You definitely did. I did not so much. I was like feeling pretty secure, even with the knight on b3 and the rook on d3. But that's when the position is basically objectively a draw. But
Yeah, I
even
didn't
at
see
that
a
point, I felt that, okay, we should find a way. Like I felt there should be a way out of this difficult situation. But there's not. And the defense is actually quite easy if you think about it. But yeah, that was game one. And then game two, I have to say. Not a great game by us. We got a good position out of the opening, but we completely
No, no, we
butchered it.
actually didn't. We didn't.
We didn't get a good position. I thought we got a great
No.
position. Oh,
No, taking on C4 is not a good move. I mean, it was my suggestion, so I'm taking the blame for this one. Which I should have known. I think I even had it in my notes that like black should play C6, for example. And taking on C4, yeah, the position we got is very dangerous. Like
okay.
after we're up pawn, it's borderline a bad position. We actually defended it pretty well. Like H6, C5 was okay. A5, the idea that I was mentioning is actually the best move. But we were on the right path, like A5 or C5.
Yeah.
Then I think A5 was the like only chance. It's +1 here. It's already like borderline losing for black.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I
And
see that.
then going to an endgame, we're suddenly like more or less getting out of it.
Yeah.
And then we were fine. Like even this G6 move that I made was kind of okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And knight F6 and everything. Just like we made a tactical mistake. After bishop F6, if you remember this moment, we had to play rook to E6. And here it's an unclear endgame, which is fine for black.
That's a nice move actually. Rook to e6, bishop takes d8. You still force the taking of the exchange with the bishop on d8, which is a badly placed bishop. We basically lost a tempo, or maybe even two tempes, because now you take on e4 with a tempo. The rook has to move. Then you take on a3, and you should be fine, more or less.
Yeah. But then, okay, it was a very tough endgame for both sides, actually. Like bishop c7 is a mistake. G5, I think, is a mistake, but it's very difficult. F4. Okay, F4 was a very obvious mistake because how can you allow knight C2?
Yeah.
And then we were getting a bit confused, I think, like low on time. We played knight G4, knight C2 was more accurate.
Knight c2 just finishes the game, more or less, because
Yeah.
they cannot go to g2, so they cannot pass that line to go hide on h1. King g2 just
And the
knight
big
e1.
mistake was my suggestion King G6, because knight G4 is making a draw by force.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think Alice also realized this.
Yeah.
And then they came up with H3, which was very logical because you're stopping knight G4.
Yeah.
And it's a very good move. And then we're in danger again. And G4, they played really well for a few minutes. Bishop E5, really good move. Everything was perfect. This moment, remember where I said like maybe rook takes A4 is better than rook D3? This was actually a good move for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the best move. Rook D3 was giving us chances again. Okay, it was like back and forth for a bit.
Yeah.
We actually had very serious drawing chances, even when I was like really worried. But
I mean, at this point, we
eventually
were all playing. Well, actually, we were playing on increment.
yeah, yeah, it was tough. It's a very tough endgame to defend when you're down on time, or even maybe with sufficient time. But okay, we got to this like losing endgame, but they couldn't find a way to win. Surprisingly, they should have won it. I mean, they should have found the Zugzwang.
Were you having any flashbacks from your game against MVL? Obviously, that's what it reminded me of. I know the structure was slightly different. I think there was a pawn on the G file, right? Was that how it was? Like pawn on
Okay, so
G4,
that was with pawn on G6.
pawn on G6 for black, right?
Yeah, versus what was it? Versus pawn on F. No, no, sorry, pawn on F6 versus pawn on G2. I'm getting
Okay.
confused.
Yes.
Black had a pawn on F6, white has a pawn on G2. And if
Yes.
the pawn ever goes to G4, it's a draw. And if black ever gets knight to G7 with the pawn on F6, it's a fortress, which I realized during the game, but Maxime didn't.
Hmm.
And eventually I zugzwanged him. It was a very complicated zugzwang with a lot of mistakes. But eventually I realized that I need to get my king to the H file. But how do I do it? Because if he plays king G4, if I play king G4, he plays king G6, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I get my king to H5, it's winning. So I need to kind of give a check to his king on the G file, rook G3. That's why I can't push my pawn. His king goes to F7, because if it goes to H7, then he's cut off. But now if I play king G4, he goes king G6. Again, so I can't do that. So I needed to find a way to get my king around. And the way I did that was by forcing his knight to G8 by using Zugzwang. And then I play king G4. And now if king G6, I go king H4, and he has to go back, allowing my king to H5 because because he needs to defend the knight on g8. So this was kind of the idea.
Mm.
But he did have moments when he was objectively drawing, and I had moments when I missed some wins.
Yeah.
And it was one of like these are the some of the more complicated endgames, and like Magnus was trying to figure it out during the game, and I think unsuccessfully because it's just really complicated. You'd be surprised by the limited material, but it's very complicated stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I know about these positions is that like having a fixed pawn, like a pawn f5 versus pawn f4, is a very bad thing because then like the king will usually have a free access to the e5 square, for example.
And this is what
So
we
it's
were
better to
trying
have
to
like a f6.
pawn on f6, but they forced us to put a pawn on f5.
Yeah, we had no, it was losing from the beginning. We had no way to avoid that.
Yeah, the knight was not having a way back. We had to go f5. Yeah.
The pawn f5 is good if we get the knight to either e6 or g6, which we eventually did. We got it to e6, and then it's a draw. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that g6 also works. Like for some reason, I thought e6 was the square that we need to be at, but g6 is just works perfectly fine as well. Like they can't make progress, which
Yeah.
kind of should be obvious, but I didn't make this connection during the game.
So let's just show the way that they could have won the game. So I think it was something along the lines of at move this was move 98 after king to e7. If they go on the back rank, rook to a8, we have to go king to f6. The knight cannot move because king to e5 comes and the pawn on f5 loses. We have to go king f6, king d6. We have to defend against check on f8 with king to f7, and now you just have to lose a tempo. This was the Zuzwang situation that you were discussing.
This is with the knight on g4, yeah.
With the knight on g4, yeah. The knight
Yeah,
cannot
with the knight on
move.
g4, then there was like multiple moments they could have gotten this, but yeah, you just wait with the rook on a8 or b8 or c8, and the king on d6, so black can't play king e7. And then if the king ever allows the king, like king g7, king e6, then the king is too far in. King f6, rook f8 again allows the king to e6, and moving the knight allows king to e5. And once the king is on e5 in any position, it's game over.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was winning, and I'm a bit surprised they didn't find it, but oh, they let us go.
We were close. We were close to our downfall, at least in that game, and then a potential Armageddon. But we made it. We're in the finals, and now we're waiting for March 5th, tomorrow. A big match between Hikaru and Levi, the content creators, and the commentators, Robert Hess and Dania. Who do you have in that one?
Uh,
Who do you
it's
want to see in the
tough.
finals?
Yeah, Robert and Donnie would be fun. I haven't played Robert in so long. Like we're the same age. We grew up together.
Yeah.
So like early 2000s, late 90s, we were playing all of these kids events, like Pan American Youth and all these like Super Nationals, all these whatever these tournaments are called.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I didn't see him for a long time between like let's say 2004 and like 2010. I don't think I saw him once because he was playing in the US, he was going to high school and so on, and I was playing in Europe. And then I saw him at the Olympiad in 2010 briefly, but we didn't really know each other. Like we had known each other as kids, but then we had lost touch, so we didn't really know each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then like a few years later when I moved back to the US, we started to get to know each other again. And we're quite good friends. So that would be interesting. It's been a long time. We have played each other a bit online, so that's but not too much.
The
And
ICC days.
Danya, I've played a little bit over the board. I think we have two classical games, one each, one win each. And besides that, not a whole lot.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot. But they're both excellent players. Okay. Now, the team of Hikaru and Levi, the thing is that Hikaru can guide Levi very well into the right direction and can sometimes take over, right, if need be.
Yeah.
He can take the wheel. And then you're just play like objectively Hikaru is of course stronger than either Danya or Robert. So but I think that we shouldn't discount that it is a team battle, it is a team event, and sometimes people think oh, it's just going to be the stronger player making moves. It's actually not the case at all, I think. The stronger player guides decisions, sometimes makes some decisions, but it isn't like just saying, okay, do this, because it wouldn't really look very nice, right? If you just said, okay, make this move, don't talk to me, just move this, move that, right?
Of course, yeah.
So that's not the idea of the event, and that's why you see the back and forth between the players. And also, if a like
But do you think it would be better if the stronger player would be like that? Would be just like, don't talk to me, just play this move up until the final few seconds when you basically have to take over as the player with the mouse.
I don't think it's realistic because the lower rated player would say stuff, and
Right.
this would you would have to you have to have a conversation. You wouldn't just say, "Shut up, I'm playing here," right? So
You can talk about the
like,
weather.
and also it when you hear something, it kind of gets into your mind. Like we saw Anish and Danny. Danny was suggesting some good stuff sometimes, but Anish was discounting it on principle, which is probably not a correct approach, and he actually missed some important resources, right? Like B takes C3 on move 18, I think basically the game-changing move that they could have
In the
played that
first
Danny
game.
was suggesting, sack the exchange, which we realized that it was the correct approach. Danny realized, and Anish, for whatever reason, decided not to go for it, which was a huge mistake, like a very, very serious mistake.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but I think that Hikaru, like I saw their match, they seem to have a good back and forth. They were playing really well in the Armageddon game. Or the other games. I think they made like
Two draws.
two draws. Yeah,
Two draws. And then in the Armageddon, they had White and Eric and Jordan went down to like 5 minutes and 57 seconds. I think that was their bid, which at least to my understanding was a bit too low. Because it's so important. I mean, it's so difficult to play whenever you have just a few seconds on the clock. Even if you get the 10 seconds increment, it's just simply not enough. You start making mistakes. And I think at that point, playing with your teammate becomes a little bit more of a liability because it's much more difficult to make decisions and to reach a consensus with your partner in a shorter amount of time, in like 10 seconds. It's so difficult, right?
yeah. That's the thing. It's like when you're just playing on your own, you kind of just make moves, and you don't have to consider the discussion part. That takes some extra time and effort. So it's all an internal process. This is like a partially internal, partially external process, and there's extra energy that you're using to discuss with someone else. Like, let's say I see a position and I think of like candidate moves, like one, two, three. I discount two of them, I play the third.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say that there's actually five reasonable candidate moves, and I didn't even consider two of them. Um, and now let's say that you suggest the other two. You're like, well, okay, you suggested three, but there's also these other two moves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
now I have to at least consider these other two moves. It takes extra time. It might be that the other two moves are good, and then you helped me, but it might be that the other two moves are not as good as the three that I considered, and then I just spent extra time to discount those. So it can either be very helpful in some positions or can be a time, like just keep it can be like extra time wasting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say, but I think like at the end of this, Hikaru and Levy, they kind of played very well. Like this bishop c7 move, Hikaru suggested it first, and but like they had a very good, like it was a very quick process. Like Hikaru suggested, but he's not 100% sure. But Levy just like makes the move, and it would end up being then rook c8, and then they quickly realized rook d5, and rook c7 is not working out. So like, and then queen e8, like queen f3, everything just worked out really nicely at the end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so if they get in flow, yeah, it could be tricky.
Yeah, and the
But
thing is, they were both teams were at this point in time trouble, so they did use that extra time that they got at the beginning, given their white piece choosing in the Armageddon. They did use all of their time to get into this better position, winning position, and then converted. What would you say a good Armageddon time would be? Would you go for the more time bid or for the less time and try to take black?
I think this format does naturally lead to like more combative games,
Uh huh.
but you have an increment, so you can't get flagged. And if the opening goes well, I would probably prefer to take black.
Interesting. Okay.
Because if the opening goes well, yeah, then you probably won't end up in any trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no like pressure that you'll get flagged. So what would we bid in like a 10-minute? I mean, probably shouldn't say this. Who knows?
Yeah. We should probably not
Beforehand.
say this. We should probably not say
But
this.
but I think you can go a little bit on the lower side compared to like a normal Armageddon.
Yeah. 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 Cool, Fabi. We'll keep it short this time.